Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Rita Koutsoudiamos, and I'm the Executive Director of the BC Alliance for Healthy Living. We're so pleased that you can join us today on this exceptionally snowy day. And for those of you joining us from the rest of the province or other parts of Canada, please don't laugh at us in our little snowmageddon here. We're just not set up for it. But we are delighted that we can continue and to offer this webinar today. That's the beauty of technology. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that this webinar is being broadcast from the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, where we have the privilege to live, work, and play. We're here today to discuss and be inspired by programs that are working with schools to promote the health and well-being of children. Currently, only 1/3 of school-age kids in Canada are meeting the Canadian 24-hour movement guidelines, and the number of kids eating enough veggies and fruit isn't much better. We also know that there is growing attention on child and youth mental wellness, and so much more we need to do to promote socio-emotional resilience and well-being. The two projects we'll hear from today are working to change that by championing healthier school food programs and increasing opportunities for kids to be active before and after school, and by training those working with children on how to deal with challenging behaviors and support mental health, which creates a safe, active environment for all. We have an excellent program lined up for you, but before we hear from those two initiatives, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, if you're having trouble hearing me, try turning up the volume on your phone or your computer. And we really want to get your input today, so we'll be asking you to use the control panel on the right-hand corner of your screen to type in questions for our speakers and think of them. We'll be having a question period after each speaker and a final round at the end of the presentation. There will also be a poll, and you'll see a blue screen that has multiple choice questions. We'll give you a few seconds to respond, and then we'll publish the results for everyone to see. Again, we really want to hear your questions and comments. Submit them at any time during the presentation by simply typing them in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. And please indicate if there's someone in particular you're addressing it to. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for, and if we miss any, then we'll send them out in a post-event email. Now, let me frame up our program for you today. In 2018, Participaction released a report card on physical activity for children and youth, which showed that only 39% of 5 to 17-year-olds were reaching the recommended amount of daily activity. The report also showed that physical activity in childhood is essential not only for physical health, but also for a healthy brain. It helps with improved memory, problem solving, stress management, self-esteem, and self-worth. We know that healthy food in childhood is also essential for better physical, mental, and emotional well-being. The 2018 BC Adolescent and Health Survey by the McCreary Center Society found that 47% of youth were eating fast food regularly, and 37% were drinking pop and energy drinks on a regular basis. Yet only 30% of youth were eating the recommended amount of fruits and veggies. The two important programs that we'll hear from today are working hard to make it easier for our children and youth to eat healthier and move more. Our first speaker, Noelle Virtue, from the BC Recreation and Parks Association, will give an overview of their province-wide before and after school recreation grants program and the training they provide on how to deal with challenging behaviors and support the mental health of children. Our second speaker, Samantha Gambling, from the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, will present on the opportunities, hurdles, and ongoing work happening right here in the province and across the country as momentum builds for a Canadian universal healthy school food program. We'll hear why these projects are important, how they're working, lessons learned, and possibilities for the future. So that's an overview of the webinar, but before we introduce our first speaker, we'd like to start with a question for you. So you should see a poll, and if you could just answer the question, which of these statements best describes your interest in the topic of today's webinar? I work with school-age children, I work in research or policy, I work in public health, I want a national healthy school food program, and I'm interested in BCRPA's before and after school recreation grants program. If you see that you fit into one or more category, then just choose the one that's the best fit for why you're joining today. Ooh, okay, so we've got a lot of public health folks. That's great, and we've got a few folks that are working with school-age children, and somebody who's in research and policy. Fantastic. That's great. Well, I think you'll find that there's something here for everyone. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce Noelle Virtue. Noelle is the project manager at BC Recreation and Parks Association, working on initiatives at both ends of the age spectrum, from infants to 13 years, as well as older adults. Her previous work has included advocacy and policy development in BC and the UK, with a particular focus on healthy living, including a year as a maternity leave at BC Alliance for Healthy Living. So we know and love Noelle. And she also enjoys being active in beautiful BC and exploring nature with her family. So I hope you've been having fun in the snow with your kids, Noelle. And thanks for joining us today. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Rita, and good morning, everyone. As Rita mentioned, my name is Noelle Virtue, and I'm the project manager for, this is a bit of a mouthful, the Before and After School Recreation Program Spaces Grants at the BC Recreation and Parks Association. So I thought I'd start off with this photo from one of our after-school programs in Quesnel, as it seemed very fitting to the current weather that we've all been experiencing this past week. And it also highlights the aim of encouraging the programs to take children outside and into nature. Next slide. To give you a little background, this initiative began in April of 2017 when BCRPA received funding from the provincial government to provide grants to our members and other community organizations to create new before and after school spaces in the recreation programs for the 2017-2018 school year. The aim was to create between 2,500 and 4,000 new spaces for children and their families, and provide an opportunity for those children to experience more physical activity as well as other recreation pursuits. Since that time, we've been fortunate to continue to receive funding to offer the grants for these programs, and our current funding ends this summer. Next slide. The types of recreation programming we've been supporting has ranged from dance and music, snowshoeing, creative arts such as special effects, makeup. We've had comics and cartoon drawing, cooking, natural sciences, swimming, Indigenous culture, leadership, yoga, outdoor play such as fort building, orienteering, plant and animal identification, as well as lots of more traditional sports such as badminton, basketball, pickleball, skating, floor hockey, and soccer. You name it, it's probably been done. Next slide. So in order to qualify for the grants, the recreation spaces must be new for either kind of a new program or expanding an existing program from, say, 12 children to 24 children. The programs must be during the school year, and they have to take place directly before or after school. So at this time, non-instructional days are not eligible, nor are evening programs. And the programs need to run for at least 8 weeks and be offered between 1 and 5 days a week. So it can't be sporadic like every other week. And it must be for children between the ages of kindergarten and grade 8. They also need to be publicly accessible, so not requiring a membership to an organization to participate. And lastly, the funding is to subsidize the program only and cannot be used to fully fund the program. While these programs are not required to take place at a school, roughly, I'd say 2/3 are based at a school and operated either by the school itself, a local recreation center, or a nonprofit organization. Luckily, to this date, we've not had to decline any applications that have met this criteria. Next slide, please. So the grants are for a maximum of $1,500 for each program. Organizations can apply for multiple programs if they wish, and the funding is distributed 3 times per year. So for fall programming, which runs September to December, winter from January to March, and spring would be April to June. Due to the increased demand, sorry, I'm losing my voice, and interest in the grants, last year we had to create a structure for the amount we were able to offer each program and organization. So many programs that we've previously funded, those organizations, or if they're receiving multiple grants, some of those do not receive the full $1,500, and that was just to make sure that we were able to try and provide some funding to all of those that were in need of it. Next slide, please. We do have a list of priorities for funding, which we'll likely need to draw upon a little bit more this next round due to the high demand we've had for programs. So these priorities include organizations that have not previously received funding through this stream, that have focused on getting children outdoors and into nature, that plan to use the funds to help subsidize registration fees for families, and those that are in communities where there's no before and after school programming currently existing. Next slide, please. So in addition to the grant, I think we passed one back. Should be additional supports. There we go, yeah. So in addition to the grant funds, organizations also receive free professional development for their managers and frontline staff, to ensure that the children are receiving exceptional programming from trained staff. So any staff working with the children or managing the program that is awarded funding can receive the High Five Principles of Healthy Child Development training free, which is a full day in-person training and includes online resources that they can continue to access. So High Five is the standard in BC for managing and leading recreation programs for school-aged children, and it provides a great foundation for those working with children in a recreation setting. Next slide, please. So in addition to the in-person training, we've also been working closely with a number of professionals throughout the province to create and facilitate one-hour webinars for staff to take part in. These webinars are also free and include topics such as planning and resources for taking children into nature, what to expect and what to bring, working with children with challenging behavior, so understanding behavior, developing proactive strategies. We also look at incorporating social emotional learning into practice. We have a 3-part series with the Connects Autism Network on working with children with autism, specifically in a recreation setting. Topics such as understanding bullying and anxiety in children and how to support them. Building rapport with children and their families, so making sure that they feel comfortable when they're coming to the programs, that the families know what's going on, the children know what to expect. Infusing fun into the workplace, so making sure the staff are feeling supported as well, and supporting inclusivity within the programs. So in all, we've been able to develop 22 separate webinars that have been offered over the 3 years. We generally try to offer each webinar on multiple occasions throughout each of the 3 cycles for the funding year, so that people have an opportunity at different times of the day. A lot of them are in the evenings to help support that for those who are working, and obviously they're running the programs generally after school hours, so the evenings seem to work well for most of the staff. And the feedback we've received for these webinars has been incredible and seems to have really helped staff to build their confidence and provide them with the tools to use during their programming. Next slide, please. So what are the results from the past 2 years? As I mentioned, our mandate for the first year was to create between 2,500 and 4,000 new before and after school recreation program spaces. And as you can see, we managed to more than double this by creating over 8,700 new spaces in 468 programs. Because of the success, we were provided additional grant funding for the following year. So the second year, we had a smaller pot of funding to distribute, and our mandate was to create 5,000 new spaces. This was also doubled by the end of the year, creating and supporting over 10,000 new spaces. And we're now in our third year of offering these grants. As I mentioned, they have become extremely popular. Word is spreading, so we are being able to offer in a lot of new communities this year, which is great. And we've heard from communities that these grants have really acted as a catalyst to enable them to offer after-school programming for the first time in some places. And in others, it's been an opportunity for organizations to relieve those wait lists of children wanting to participate in their programs. So it has really helped to support a lot of communities in this way. Next slide, please. So just to provide you with some of the highlights that we've had from these grants, I'm going to have a few slides to show you the results and the programming that we've been able to fund. As one of the priorities for funding was to provide subsidized registration fees for families, we've seen many free and very low cost programs being offered. So here are a couple of the quotes that we've had to kind of highlight this. Next slide, please. This funding allowed communities to offer programming to children who may not have had the opportunity previously to be exposed to recreational activities. It's supported parents and guardians who've been seeking meaningful and high quality and affordable care for their children in the before and after school hours. And it's also allowed organizations to develop equipment libraries for present and future programming to build capacity within those communities where they now have quality staff on hand with the skills and tools to lead successful programs. Many of them will have the equipment to be able to lead these programs beyond, the funding. Next slide, please. No, sorry, next slide. Great. So we have seen lasting impacts on children and their families in their communities, and we have a few more quotes that I'd like to share with you. So one is, this funding has allowed us to keep our class size small, more staff to child ratio, and allowed us to have a behavior interventionist that supports families. Another was that parents loved this morning program. It provided a safe, warm, and fun space for children who would normally be dropped off unattended in the mornings, and parents felt great knowing their children were well cared for and starting their day being active. And another was, one of the primary successes of the program has been the development and strengthening of community bonds amongst children and parents who participate in the program. Many children love that they have the opportunity to deepen their relationships with local kids that they may or may not have had known from school, and parents really appreciated the affordable, high quality childcare that's provided. Next slide, please. So a great example of one of the programs that was expanded is the Richmond Art Track, which some of you may be aware of. So thanks to the grants they received, the program has expanded from one school in 2013 to 6 locations now. And this program was created out of a need in the community where it was observed that children were remaining on the school grounds after school without supervision. And so this program now provides more structured activities for these children, including art and physical literacy. Next slide, please. Some other positive changes that have been noted by teachers and parents alike is that programs are having a real impact on children's behaviors. So including increased attentiveness in the classroom, improved school grades, better attendance at school, and increased general happiness amongst the children who are taking part in some of these after-school programs. And it's often been noted that the children are with inconsistent attendance generally are ever present on the days when they know they have the after-school program. So you can tell that it's really making an impact on their lives as well, but helping in many other aspects. Next slide, please. Thanks to the encouragement by BCRPA to increase outdoor nature-based programming through these grants, we're also seeing much more confidence in leaders to take kids outside for activities than they previously had, and the training and resources provided have helped to give them the confidence to do so. And they also have seen a difference in the children's behavior when they're outdoors. Often children who have acted out in programming previously are kind of much more even-keeled when they're outdoors doing the same activities. And we've also heard from several leaders how children are now inclined to spend their playtime outdoors after participating in the programs, which is great to see. Next slide, please. So in terms of reach throughout the province, we can see a fairly wide spread. This particular map depicts programs from last school year, so 2018-2019. However, they're fairly similar in terms of reach as the previous school year. And this year, we have an even greater number of programs offered as word continues to spread about the opportunity to create new programs in communities. So we're not only seeing more programs in existing communities, but also seeing a lot more new communities that have not been able to offer before or after school programming previously take part in the grant process. Next slide, please. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have.
Wow, thank you so much, Noelle. That is just fantastic. I'm really impressed. 14,374 children participating. What a great outcome, and just wonderful that you've been able to prioritize outdoor and enhance the confidence of your leaders to get more kids outdoor, and I'm sure that is having a ripple effect in families. So just fantastic to hear about, you know, what you've been able to do with this granting project. We have a question from Laura, who asks, is it 1,500 once a year or 1,500 3 times a year?
Yeah, it could be 1,500 for up to 3 times a year. So each grant of $1,500 is awarded for each term, and there are 3 terms throughout the year. Yeah, so one program could potentially provide up to $4,500 for an organization. However, those spaces need to, if it was the same program and you knew it was going to be the same children throughout the year, then it would only be the $1,500. So it really has to be spaces that are available for potentially new children to participate.
Okay, that's great. And then Megan wanted to know if there was any crossover or funding available for food skills as part of it.
Potentially there could be. So if it was an after-school program that focused on food skills, yeah, that could potentially be considered for the grant as well.
Okay, great. And then Valerie wanted to know, where is the information about how to apply for the grant?
Good question, and I'm sorry, I should have put that on the slide. It's on the BCRPA website. I believe it's on the left-hand panel under everything else. It'll be before and after school recreation grants. Yeah, and the next intake for the spring, the deadline is February 4th.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit more about the socio-emotional resilience components and how you're seeing that roll out in communities, and is there a big demand for that, or are there themes that you're seeing through that?
So the training that we've been offering, the webinars, we've been asking staff to participate in at least 3 webinars over the year. Often they're participating in many more than that because they're finding them really useful. We had Katie Bigsby from Bigsby Consulting, who some people may have worked with previously. I know she's worked with a lot of school districts and recreation centers on challenging behavior, and very much focusing a couple of her webinars on social emotional learning and helping to support staff to support the children in that aspect. And so, and also for them to gain a better understanding of the importance of social emotional learning within the programs. In terms of actual kind of tangible examples. I can't think of any off the top of my head. We do get a little bit of feedback from people who are participating in the webinars, but a lot of our kind of final reporting is done by the management. So, and often there aren't specific questions around that. It's more like highlighting some of the key pieces that they've, success stories that they've seen within their programs. We have seen some really incredible stories about refugees who've come over, and particularly boys who've had, have left a country where men are often very violent, or it's the armies that are coming in and taking child soldiers with them. And so we've had a couple of instances where boys have come in from situations like that into these after-school programs, and with the training that the staff have had and working with the boys and seeing that, okay, so there can be male role models who are caring and kind, and not all are aggressive and to be feared. So we've had some, quite kind of heart-wrenching stories that I've read throughout this about how some of these programs have made a real significant impact on children's lives.
Yeah, that sounds very powerful, and also sort of underscores the importance of a whole person approach as well. And to just focusing on we're going to play soccer today, but really thinking about it in terms of a whole person and those social emotional connections, and that's wonderful. We have another question, and they want to know if equity population groups such as low-income groups, rural remote groups are targeted in the awarding of the grants.
So we haven't been targeting necessarily. However, that was one of the priorities in a sense. And as I mentioned, thus far, we've been able to ensure that everyone who's applied and met the criteria up until now has been awarded some form of funding to ensure that we're not turning anybody away. I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to continue to do that, just as word spreads further and further about the funding, but that is definitely a priority, and certainly around subsidizing registration fees in some communities. We're also working quite closely, so we're offering the webinar training to the staff who are working as part of the After School Sports and Arts Initiative, which very much focuses and targets schools in those areas.
That's great. That's a nice overlap. And kind of a related question here from another Laura is, will the funding be available in how many years to come? And any insights of what's on the horizon?
That's a very good question. We're actually planning to meet with the funder hopefully later this month to kind of gauge whether or not we will be able to continue to offer this. But so far we have been receiving funding year on year, so I'm hopeful that we will continue to do so.
Excellent. And then somebody wanted to know if it's Andrea wants to know, can school districts apply for the funding?
Yes. So anyone can really apply, so long as it's not, as I said, membership based. We have a lot of school districts, individual schools that have applied. We have Indigenous organizations, we have nonprofits, we even have some private facilities that have applied, and quite a number of municipalities and regional districts too.
Great. Yeah, the questions are really coming in now, which is fantastic. So, apologies if I'm pronouncing the name wrong, but I have a question from Dorota, who wants to know, can anyone take the training webinars, or are they only for those who've received the grant?
At the moment, they're only for those who have received the grant. Our hope is that we can put them up on our e-learning site eventually, but at the moment, yeah, they're just for those who have received the grant funding. if you're interested in offering something like this to your organization or your staff, though, please do get in touch and we can see what we can do to help support that.
That's a great opportunity, and hopefully some people will take you up on that. I have another question. You mentioned that some communities have used this opportunity to develop equipment libraries. Do you foresee some communities being able to carry on this programming without future funding? So those that have done the equipment.
Yeah, I do. So we do have a number of cases where, because they were able to provide the equipment,